Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Hi, we're back and delighted to have with us today David Platt. He's internationally known and he's a pastor, author, and his new book entitled Counterculture. He's also the president of the International Missions Board and founder of Radical, but I want to talk to him about his book called Counterculture. Hi, David. How you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Where are you? Where are we Skyping you in from? Are you on Mars or someplace, or where are you?
I'm in Birmingham, Alabama right now.
Good for you. All right.
Down tomorrow morning, but I'm here for right now.
Attaboy. Good to see you. All right. Thanks for being with us. Well, you kind of hit it head on in your book, Challenging Christians to Live Counterculturally. What do you mean by that?
Well, basically, amidst the rapidly shifting moral landscape that we're living in our culture, I wrote this book, Counterculture, to encourage and hopefully equip Christians to stand with conviction and courage on some of the most pressing social issues around us in our day, and also with the compassion of Christ behind that conviction and the way we live. And then at the same time, I'm hopeful that through writing this book, that maybe some non-Christians who read this book will get a perspective on why Christians who actually believe the Bible are so passionate about issues like marriage or abortion or poverty or sex trafficking or religious liberty, and hopefully see a compassion that lies behind what Christians believe.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of outreach in these areas, but also I'm seeing a lot of polarization in these areas. Some churches are just flat staying away from it. They're just not preaching anything that has to do with these social issues. They've been politicized. Is that hurting us?
I think so. So one of the burdens that really drove me to write this book was looking out at the Christian landscape and church landscape and seeing on some social issues, many Christians and church leaders passionate, like issues like poverty or sex trafficking, to see evangelicals, younger evangelicals in particular, really passionate about issues like that. But which is something we need to be passionate about. These are major issues in the world around us. At the same time, what concerns me was when the same Christians or church leaders are much more passive about other social issues that are just as, if not in some ways, more important. And it's like we've chosen which social issues we're going to address and which social issues we're going to ignore based on what's most comfortable and least costly to us in the culture around us. So if we speak out on poverty or sex trafficking, the culture is going to applaud us. When we speak out with Christian conviction on marriage or abortion, then we're going to be criticizing the culture. And so my aim in Counterculture is to show us that the gospel doesn't give us the option of picking and choosing which social issues we're going to address and which ones we're going to ignore. If we're doing that, then our supposed social justice becomes a selective social injustice really quickly that misses the whole heart of the gospel that we claim to believe.
Well, that's well said, because the two that are the most toxic are abortion and same-sex marriages. They're just not being touched by the church. We had a petition here in the state of Oregon to ask churches to help us sign to stop state taxes for paying for 8 abortions a day. And we couldn't get enough churches to participate to sign that petition. It just broke my heart.
Well, you know, an issue like abortion, I mean, these are issues where I think in many churches we all almost just relegate that to the political realm, and we forget the fact that this is a biblical issue far before it's a political issue, that this is a God issue. This is God's intimate relationship with the unborn, with children he's crafting in the image, in his image, in the womb of a mother, and not just to think through, okay, then what does that mean for us politically? Because there are political implications of a biblical understanding of life, but just personally. So that's one of my goals in this Counterculture book, is not just to help us open our eyes to the fact that moral or political neutrality here is not an option on an issue like abortion, but then to take a step further and say, so what can I do? And to look at people around me, the community around me, and say, where are women who are struggling, wrestling with whether or not they should have a child, and how can I come alongside, serve them, care for them, help them raise that baby if necessary, or help them put that baby up for adoption and order that. So children we want to live, but we also want women to thrive. And so how does that affect the way we live as followers of Christ in a culture of abortion?
Are we afraid of persecution or offending people, or both?
I think both. I think nobody likes to be rejected, and it's good that we don't go seeking persecution by any means. But the reality is, and Christ made it clear, as we follow him, it's going to be costly for us in the world around us. It was costly for him, and he says, you're fooling yourself if you think it's not going to be costly for you. And so that hits at the core issue then. Is Christ more important to us than our comforts? Is obedience to him and reflection of him more important to us than our reputation in the culture around us? And this is a question every one of us has to address in our own lives.
The flip side of this, David, is have we overemphasized grace? And that's tough for me to say because I understand grace and we preach grace, obviously, but do we do it at the cost of not standing for what the Bible really says?
Well, I've always been I've benefited from, learned from, been shaped in many ways just by the way Dietrich Bonhoeffer spelled out costly grace. And for him to do that in the culture he was in the midst of Nazi Germany around him, and to think through, all right, so grace, free love from God, unconditional grace, mercy, not based on anything I can do, but on everything God has done for me. But then what does that lead me to do? It leads me to give my all in following Christ. And that has huge implications for my life and the culture around me. And so I think it's not even a matter of overemphasizing grace. It's a matter of misunderstanding grace and not realizing that grace leads to action. And those who have Christ in them, who have the love of Christ in them, are then compelled to make the love of Christ known to people around them. And so if we're compelled to make the love of Christ known, then that affects the way we think about issues like poverty, sex trafficking, abortion, marriage, and everything in between.
All right, I want to deal with the subject of pluralization, the plurality of religions, and somehow Christianity just being thrown in there as one of them. All roads lead to heaven. We're all believing in the same God. What are we doing by allowing ourselves to be grouped into that?
Well, I think there's increasingly in our culture a picture that just says, okay, they're all religions fundamentally the same, superficially different. And I think this is where we need to be wise in the way we approach that kind of idea, philosophy that's everywhere around us, in showing some of the uniquenesses of Christ. First of all, showing them with our lives, but then as we have an opportunity to speak about the uniquenesses of Christ. I mean, it's even commonplace. I think about the last week and how there have been statements that have virtually equated radical Islam with just radical types of all types of religions. And what we don't do is we don't pause to stop and think, okay, well, what are the beliefs that are driving this or that action? And to really ask, are they the same? And this is what we're losing. So I think about Muslim friends that I have, for example, who I respect and care for, and but we disagree passionately about fundamental issues. They clearly believe Jesus didn't die on the cross and rise from the grave. I do believe that Jesus died on the cross and rise from the grave. And I think those are serious issues. And I think there's a way for us to care for each other, love each other, respect each other, but not say, well, in the end, we're just believing the same thing. Because the reality is we're not. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have dignity in our disagreement with each other, but there is disagreement.
Has the Nehemiah spirit died? In other words, we have a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. We continue to build and add to the kingdom, but we also have to defend it. I don't know if we understand persecution, and are we really willing to pay a price for our faith in America now?
I think that question is coming obviously more and more and more to the forefront. Our brothers and sisters around the world experience persecution of much more severe kinds. And I think about a friend of mine, Ian, in North Africa, who, if the wrong person finds out that she's a follower of Christ and is telling others about Christ, she'll immediately have her throat slit. And so thankfully, we're not in that kind of picture. But I guess that's the question. With decreasing religious liberty, with increasing cost of following Christ, and there's numerous examples. I mean, you just think about recently the Atlanta fire chief who was fired because he expressed what Christians have believed for 2,000 years about marriage, and so he lost his job. So are we willing to to lose some things in our culture in order to stand strong on Christian conviction. And I'm hopeful, and that's part of why I wrote this counterculture book, is to encourage Christians that to stand with courage and conviction and compassion, believing that Christ is worth it. He's worth more than anything this world has to offer us.
So in essence, what you're saying, David, is you're encouraging people to embrace persecution for the right reasons.
Exactly. I'm encouraging people to follow Christ, pursue Christ, stand with conviction on the words of Christ, not change beliefs according to changing cultural tides in order to accommodate culture, but to stand with conviction, but knowing that there's going to be cost that comes with that.
So part of that is recognizing some of our history. I mean, there's a lot of people, now they've been designated as saints, who have been given their lives. They've been persecuted. I mean, there's a lot of people who have paid the ultimate price for their faith and continue to do so this day. It hasn't quite come to that level in America, but boy, you see signs of it may be there. But what about looking into some of these people and what they paid to stay faithful? Can't we learn from that?
I think there's much to learn. You take a chapter like Hebrews chapter 11 that just gives us this hall of faith and those who've gone before us. And at the end of that chapter, you see this list of people who, some of them who experienced great victory, others who were beheaded. And so this is the beauty of the gospel, is that for the last 2,000 years, it has been resilient through changing cultures, and it has stood the truth of time. It is timeless truth from God. And so that's the question. We've got over 100 Christians around the world are killed every month in the name of Christ. And so we have brothers and sisters we can look to around the world who beckon us to, as we might face, again, not on the same level as many of them are facing, but on increasing level, cost of following Christ and proclaiming Christ in our culture. I hope that we'll find encouragement from those we see in Christian history as well as those around us to stand with compassion on the truth that we know in Christ.
You know, it's so interesting, David, and I'm sure you watch it. Of course, we do here at theDove Radio and TV. You see, America is certainly not lacking in churches and books and media. We're in all those areas, and I am thrilled that we are. The question that has to be asked, we don't seem to be turning the tide in our culture. We don't seem to be pushing back. We're losing ground. And I don't know, you're talking about a counterculture. Are we heading towards some kind of a conflict, or do you think we really will change things?
I look in Christian history and I see some of the times where the church has thrived the most has been times when it's been in a small minority even. I mean, that's how the whole picture starts in the book of Acts and through the first couple centuries of Christianity and at other points throughout Christianity. And so here's my confidence really doesn't lie in whether or not the culture is going to change in this way or that way. My confidence lies in the fact that Christ's truth will stand the test of time, and those who trust in his truth and show his love as an expression of that truth can rest confident that no matter if culture continues to be more increasingly adversarial to Christian belief, or if there's some kind of change in tide, that our confidence is still in the same place, our anchor is still in the same place. And that's what gives us a ballast to stand on and thrive in, regardless of what's happening in the culture around us.
You know, you make a great point there, and that is that at the end of the day, the conflict between the culture and Christianity actually has become an opportunity for us to lead people to Christ. Two questions are being asked. What is truth and who can I trust? And as crazy as the world gets every day, those two questions become more and more predominant in the minds of people. And the answer is the gospel and Jesus. I mean, that's the truth, and that's who you can trust. So in spite of the fact we may not be pushing the culture back, what an opportunity to win people to Christ.
And the whole discussion about homosexuality and gay and lesbian that goes around that. The reality is, as we talk about marriage, the design of God in marriage from the very beginning of creation is to be a display of his love for people, that a husband's love for his wife is intended to display Christ's love for the church, and the church's love for Christ is intended to be reflected in a wife's love for her husband. And so this picture, there's nothing better than God's design for marriage. And so this whole discussion provides an opportunity to share God's design for marriage, and in the process share the gospel. So as darkness, so to speak, surrounding marriage creeps in, the opportunity for light to shine in a husband who loves his wife enough to lay down his life for her in serving her, and a wife who gladly follows her husband's loving leadership. This picture, we can't create anything better. God's the one who made it this way. God is good. And so the more we show that, the more gospel light will shine in the middle of the culture around us.
All right, the book is entitled Counterculture. Where can people get a copy?
They can get a copy at any number of places, really wherever books are sold or online. So counterculturebook.com is kind of the primary landing place for information.
All right, and people want to get a hold of you, radical.net.
That's correct. That would be the resource site that kind of is associated with all that I'm doing in ministry.
Great. Well, about a minute left. What's next for you, David? What's when do you sleep?
I've just stepped into a new role where I'm leading the IMB. It stands for International Mission Board. Basically, I'm convinced the greatest injustice in the world, and amidst all the things that I address in this counterculture book, I'm convinced the greatest injustice is that there are a couple of billion people in the world who still have little to no access to the gospel. They've never even heard of God's love in Christ, and that's just not tolerable. And so I'm praying, I want to be a part of a Moravian-type mission movement in the church in our day who says, just saying, this is not tolerable to us, and we want to get the gospel to every single person on the planet, and just praying that God would raise up tens of thousands of people who would go all around the world in all kinds of different ways, through business avenues, as students, as retirees, but to get the gospel to the nations, and that's what I want to be a part of.
Great. How do people get involved with you on that?
So imb.org is the primary place, and hopefully in the days to come there'll just be more and more avenues to connect along those lines, and hopefully just opening the floodgates of avenues for people to get overseas among unreached peoples.
One last question before I let you go. Do you think that the Christians are prepared to, how do you turn the other cheek and love somebody that is involved in evil?
You focus on the cross, and that's why I start this counterculture book at the gospel and end it there and all throughout, because this is exactly what Christ did. Those who were persecuting him, he loved. He's praying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. And so how can we reflect that? Only Christ in us can enable us to love like that. But look at people who oppose us in a variety of different ways, and who may even work in active opposition against us, to say it's worth it to the reflection of Christ, no matter what's going on in the culture around me. And the only way we can do that is through the love that Christ in us compels outside of us.
Thanks, David. You're an inspiration. Keep up the good work. And again, if you want to correspond with him, radical.net, or take a look for the book, Counterculture. I'm sure it's in the bookstores locally as well as online. Thank you, David. Blessings to you. Let's stay in touch.
Enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right. God bless. All right. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.